Hey guys, guess what time it is? It's story time. I know. I actually, if you guys were on our Google chat last week, I actually finished reading Junie B. Jones while we were on the Google chat. If you missed that, I am so sorry. Because now I gave all the books back to Shelby. They're all in her bag for her to pick up. But when I was there dropping the books off, I picked up Wayside School is Falling Down. So we did Sideways Stories from Wayside School. This is the second one. So you guys already heard all about the kids that go to Wayside School. And you heard that the gym teacher, he is the one who actually wrote the book. So we're going to find out what is happening in Wayside School is Falling Down. All right. So I want you to know this is going to be one of those books that we're going to read a few chapters and then you're going to end up needing to get it on your own. You'll order it from Amazon or you can watch it on YouTube, I think. But my whole thing is always about getting you inspired to continue reading some books. If I read the whole thing to you, you don't need to read it. So I'm going to read some chapters this week. I'll post those. But your job this summer is if you really like it, have mom or dad get this for you. And you guys do that as your bedtime reading routine. Maybe you read some, they read some, or you read it all to them, or they read it all to you. As long as you are getting some summer reading, I don't care how you get it, okay? It's just as important to be read to as you are reading, okay? Because your listening comprehension is huge when it comes to being able to listen to a teacher or listen in meetings or listen to somebody's phone conversation and being able to carry on conversation. So that listening comprehension, super important, okay? So it's okay if they're the ones reading to you, but I'm gonna start it and see how you like it. Chapter 1, a package for Mrs. Jules. Okay, and there we go. Lewis, the yard teacher, frowned. The schoolyard was a mess. There were pencils and pieces of paper everywhere. How did this junk get here? He wondered. Well, I'm not going to pick it up. It wasn't his job to pick up garbage. He was just supposed to pass out the balls during lunch and recess and also to make sure the kids didn't kill each other. He sighed, then began cleaning it up. He loved all the children at Wayside School. He didn't want them playing on a dirty playground. As he was picking up the pencils and pieces of paper, a large truck drove into the parking lot. It honked its horn twice, beep, beep, and then twice more, beep, beep. Lewis ran to the truck. Quiet, he whispered. Children are trying to learn in there. He pointed at the school. A short man with a big, bushy hair stepped out of the truck. I have a package for someone named Mrs. Jules, he said. I will take it, said Lewis. Well, are you Mrs. Jules? Asked the man. No, said Lewis. Well, I have to give it to Mrs. Jules, said the man. Lewis thought for a moment. He didn't want the man disturbing the children. He knew how much they hated to be interrupted when they were working. I'm Mrs. Jules, he said. But you just said you weren't Mrs. Jules. I changed my mind, said Lewis. The man got the package out of the back of the truck and gave it to Lewis. Here you go, Mrs. Jules, he said. Oh, Lewis grunted. It was a very heavy package. The word fragile was printed on every side. He had to be careful not to drop it. The package was so big, Lewis couldn't see where he was going. Fortunately, he knew the way to Mrs. Jules' class by heart. It was straight up. Wayside School was 30 stories high with only one room on each story. Mrs. Jules' class was at the very top. It was Lewis's favorite class. He pushed through the door to the school and then started up the stairs. There were no elevators. There were stairs that led down to the basement, too, but nobody ever went down there. There were dead rats living in the basement. The box was pressed against Lewis's face, squishing his nose. Even so, when he reached the 15th floor, he could smell Miss Mush cooking in the cafeteria. It smelled like she was making mushrooms. Maybe on the way back, I'll stop by Mrs. Mush's room and get some mushrooms, he thought. He didn't want to miss Miss Mush's mushrooms. They were her specialty. He huffed and groaned and continued up the stairs. His arms and legs were very sore. But he didn't want to rest. This package might be important, he thought. He had to give it to Mrs. Schulz right away. He stepped easily from the 18th story to the 20th story because there was no 19th story. Mrs. Zarves taught the class on the 19th story, and there was no Mrs. Zarves. At last, he struggled up to the final step on the 30th story. He knocked on Mrs. Jules' door with his head. Mrs. Jules was in the middle of teaching her class about gravity, and then she heard the knock. "Come in," she called. I can't open the door," Lewis gasped. "My hands are full. I have a package for you." Mrs. Jules faced the class. "Who wants to open the door for Lewis?" All the children raised their hands. Oh, they loved to be interrupted when they were working. "Oh dear, how will I ever choose?" asked Mrs. Jules. "Well, I have to be fair about this. I know. We'll have a spelling bee. And the winner will get to open the door." Lewis knocked his head against the door again. "It's very heavy," he complained, "and I'm very tired." Just a second," Mrs. Schultz called back. "Allison, the first word for you is heavy." "Heavy," said Allison. Heavy, heavy. Good, very good. Jason, you're next. Tired. Tired, said Jason. Sleepy, tired. Lewis felt the package slipping from his sweaty fingers. He shifted his weight to get a better grip. The corners of the box dug into the sides of his arms. He felt his hands going numb. Actually, he didn't feel them go numb. "Oh, Jenny, package." "Package," said Jenny. Box, package. "Excellent," said Mrs. Jules. Lewis felt like he was going to faint. At last, John opened the door. I won the spelling bee, Lewis," he said. "Very good, John," muttered Lewis. "Aren't you going to shake my hand?" asked John. Lewis shifted the box to one arm and quickly shook John's hand and then grabbed the box again and staggered into the room. Where do you want it, Mrs. Schulz?" he asked. I don't know," said Mrs. Schulz. What is it?" "I don't know," said Lewis. "I'll have to put it down someplace so that I can open it." Um, but how can I tell you where to put it until I know what it is?" asked Mrs. Jules. You might put it in the wrong place." So Lewis held the box as Mrs. Jules stood on a chair next to him and tore open the top. His legs wobbled beneath him. "It's a computer!" exclaimed Mrs. Jules. Everyone booed. "What's the matter?" asked Lewis. "I thought everyone loved computers." "We don't want it," Lewis said. Eric Bacon. "Take it back, Jack," said Terrence. "Get that piece of junk out of here," said Marissa. "Now, don't be in the way," said Mrs. Jules. Now, don't be that way," said Mrs. Jules. "The computer will help us learn. It's a lot quicker than the paper and pencil." But the quicker we learn, the more work we have to do," complained Todd. "You may set it over there on the counter," Lewis said, Mrs. Jules. Lewis set it on the counter next to Sherry's desk, and then he collapsed on the floor. "Now, watch closely," said Mrs. Jules. Everyone gathered around the new computer. It had a full-color monitor and 2 disk drives. Mrs. Jules pushed it out the window. They all watched it fall and smash against the sidewalk. See, said Mrs. Jules, that's gravity. Oh, now I get it, said Joe. Oh, thank you, Louis, said Mrs. Jules. I've been trying to teach about gravity all morning. We've been using pencils and pieces of paper, but the computer was a lot quicker.